Hey, it's Scott Bollinger, and I am here today with Patrick Garman. Patrick is founder of Mindsize.
A partner. Technically,
Partner.
it existed before I was around, but it wasn't really doing anything. It was sort of a name in a closet, and we pulled it out, and now I'm part of it, and we made it something awesome.
Cool. So Patrick has worked a lot with WooCommerce, especially at scale, really large stores doing really crazy high amounts of volume. And so I wanted to get him here to talk to us about scaling WooCommerce and just practical tips for WooCommerce store owners, how they can run their store better, make sure that it is performing well because a faster store means more orders. And also if there is, a spike in sales to make sure that their site doesn't go down. So Patrick, thanks for being here. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit more about Mindsize and what you're working on?
Sure. So Mindsize is myself and my partners, Zach and Scott. Zach also has a background in scaling WooCommerce, has done some large sites and some goes around speaking at WordCamps and just keynoted at WooConf around scaling WooCommerce and making WooCommerce fast because the speed of your site directly impacts your conversions. I don't know all the numbers off the top of my head, but it's a pretty drastic change, even if you're just half a second slower. And our third partner, Scott, he knows no code whatsoever, but is a scientist, and his role in our company is to help us help store owners make money. So not by making the site faster or more scalable or anything, but being able to take the same amount of users and making more money from them because they're either spending more or converting better or any of those fun metrics. So we've been in business since the beginning of the year, around January, and we've rapidly grown since then. So I think yesterday, actually, we went from 11 to 12 people. And in less than a year's time, we've just grown exponentially.
Awesome. Cool. So Patrick and I were chatting at WooConf, and he was telling me some stories about projects he's worked on where the stores have just done crazy high order volume. And some of the information is private, and so I want to make sure that we don't overshare. But I really wanted Patrick to kind of go into some of the things that he was telling me as much as he can, and talk about just what using WooCommerce looks at when you're doing just crazy amounts of orders. Tens of millions of dollars a year with a small average order volume. Because the thing is, like with e-commerce, even if you have a high revenue number, if you're selling products at a few $1,000s a pop, that doesn't necessarily mean you have a lot of transactions going on. But if you have a smaller amount for your average order value, like let's say your order value is $50, you're going to have, but you have the same amount of revenue, you're going to have an insane amount of orders being processed on your site, and that can really take a toll on your server. And so one of the things we were chatting about at WooConf is that WooCommerce wasn't really meant to scale that big when it was built, because most people just aren't doing tens of millions of dollars a year and thousands of transactions a week. So Patrick, maybe tell everybody just what you can about some of those stories of some of the sites you've worked on, what type of volume they're doing, what happened in that process. I know you told me at one point the site went completely down and you had to queue up people to even be able to visit the site, things like that.
Sure. One important note too I'd make is while these examples are all very high scale and everyone thinks I wish I could have that many sales, but I won't ever, or I'll not hit that for a long time. Everything is proportional. So every site's different, and the way that it handles data and the plugins that's installed, the infrastructure behind it. So where a single site with a gigantic infrastructure can maybe handle more volume, a small site doing 10% the traffic, but maybe 10% the infrastructure will have these same exact issues, most likely. So the biggest issue in handling order volume that I've seen anyways is just the raw amount of data attached to orders. When you think of what happens when a customer is on your site and everything that's attached to that as far as what the server does in each of those cases, there's not a lot of resource intensive actions right up until they get to checkout. So adding to cart, removing from cart, interacting with cart is all a really good place to look to see how much people are doing on your site rather than just looking at a product and leaving. Once they start hitting their My Account page, you're starting to run some more intense queries though.
Yeah, so like an example would be you add something to your cart, then you purchase it, and you are all of a sudden you're logged in, and then instead of leaving the site, you go back and continue browsing the site when you're logged in, and then maybe like it's not cached anymore because many hosts don't cache when you're logged in. So now you're not just testing, just adding to cart and checking out. You now have to test, oh, well, now there's people also who are not cached who are browsing my site, hitting my server, things like that, right?
Exactly. When we run load tests for our clients, we do some research ahead of time to figure out, okay, what does their audience really look like? And what does that audience look like at different times? Because sometimes during launches, the audience is completely different in what they're doing. But a good example would be this one site. I think we had 15% of people searching, another 10 or 15% of people hitting the My Account page, 20% of people just browsing the front of the site while being logged out, another 20% browsing around, adding to cart, logging in, then browsing around some more, and building really detailed examples of what our users are doing. Generally, when we're doing this, we're using load impact. So you just click record in your Chrome browser extension and just records everything you're doing, which makes it really easy to create these load tests. But then you, when running the test, can essentially have a slider of how much do I want people to be doing this action, and see really how much the My Account page or adding to cart or searching impacts your performance. And that's not even getting to the checkout, which is the most critical part of the entire process.
Right. So we were talking about a couple examples, and I mean, what can you share about what you've seen as far as like order volume and, you know, in real life numbers, and sort of even if it's ballpark of revenue numbers, of because the stuff you were telling me was just crazy.
Yeah. So when you click place order in WooCommerce, the amount of data that's created, just to give you an idea of one order, and then you can think exponentially from there. You have a post, you have around 45 to 50 metas attached to that post without any plugins installed. As soon as you add payment gateways, also attaching meta, affiliate plugins, also attaching meta, that number could easily go 70, 80, or even higher. I've seen some orders with 100 metas attached to them. Then for every single line item of the order, including every fee, every shipping cost, taxes, each tax is a separate line item. Those all are inserted into the order items table. Each of those has, maybe 4 or 5 metas attached to those as well. And then if you're using a payment gateway that has payment tokens, those sometimes also get saved. Those have meta also. So that is a single order. Every time you click place order, all of this data is created. It happens within a fraction of a second, but now imagine you're creating 2 orders in a second and maybe 10 orders in a second, which we've seen in live WooCommerce sites. If you're creating even just 50 metas per order, and now you have 10 orders per second, you're creating 500 metas per second? And imagine that sustained for an hour. The post meta table in WooCommerce or in WordPress was not necessarily built to scale in that way at that speed. So when you've got sites with post meta tables of hundreds of millions of rows of meta, that table gets a little slow, and those inserts gradually slow down. And as you're inserting those 10 orders per second, now you're locking the post meta table. Post meta table locking up essentially kills your entire checkout process, and now you've got checkouts backing up, and now everyone across the entire site slowing down because all your web servers, Apache, Nginx, PHP, whatever you've got running, is just being caught up in this train wreck of a situation where one thing fell over up front, the post meta table in this scenario, and everything dies. And unless your traffic goes away or you restart your MySQL or find some solution to it, you're not coming back up, which if you're processing that much order volume, using your example, $50 per order, and then you have 10 orders per second, that's also $500 per second that you could be losing in sales because your entire site's gone down. Sustain that for an hour, and imagine the lost sales. Not to mention the potential sales of everyone seeing, oh, their site went down, so maybe they don't have their business all the way together, and maybe I don't want to order there. It just is mass chaos at that point.
So you had a situation where you actually, the site was so overloaded that you had to actually queue people up to wait to actually access the site. Is that right?
Yes, we did. So it's actually pretty sure all over social media at this point from when it would happen or when it happened. But when ColourPop went down during a flash sale, the site was down. There's no getting to it, but we found a service called Queue It. We could put a landing page in front of the entire site, and to get to the site, you had to wait in a queue. And if you just went on Twitter and searched hashtag ColourPopQ, you likely will still find some of the tweets and other things being shared during that time, but that's the only way the website came back online. We had no way to add more infrastructure. We had no way to slow down the traffic. And at that time, every time we thought we were ready for the next flash sale, something else happened. More traffic came. We would solve one issue, and the company was growing so fast we just couldn't keep up with it. But Queue It saved the day. I was sitting at a conference table with our host, another hosting company, the support guys from WooCommerce, trying to figure out how do we solve this right now, because there's who knows how many people lined up to get to the site. Found this, I think they're a Polish company, Danish company, somewhere out there in Europe. The CEO was hanging around it in the middle of the night watching a hockey game, and he helped us get it spun up real quick and saved the site.
That's pretty crazy to have so much traffic that it's, I mean, and this is a site that's already big, already paying a lot of money for their hosting, already has had work done on it to scale, and they're still crashing everything to the point where you have to queue something up for them to see. I mean, that is just a crazy amount of scale.
Yeah, it was a crazy time. Everything was chaos every time we did a launch. We would prepare as much as possible. But at the end of the day, when more people show up than you anticipated, it's just like physical stores. Do you think of Black Friday maybe before everyone started shopping online for everything? I mean, people trampling each other at brick and mortar stores because they're all trying to get through the same door. It's a similar concept. The stores weren't built to handle that many people rushing into it, and your digital store is the same way. Yeah.
So, I mean, most people are not doing that type of scale. Most people are less scale. But like you mentioned before, even if you're, only doing, a few orders per hour, or maybe you have a spike and a bunch of people visit your site, and like we said, they're browsing, and people are adding to cart and checking out and stuff. Even if it's not big numbers, you can still lock up your site and lose money if you have not been prepared for it. So if I'm just kind of the average WooCommerce store owner, what are some simple steps I can take to make sure that my site is ready for, even a small spike in orders, say like on a Black Friday, Cyber Monday type thing?
Sure. So the big thing to remember, there's a couple big things, is speed and scalability are not the same thing. When you're running your site, if you have a gigantic database, your site should still run fast. You're not scaling your site because you have necessarily a large database. To me, scale is actual traffic, handling orders, something of that nature. But speed is how fast the site is handling everything without dealing with the scale. So when you're running your site, it doesn't matter what server it's on, if it's locally or on a dev server or one host or the other, your site should run fast regardless. Everyone really thinks that running the certain version of MySQL or Nginx or PHP or PHP 7 magically will save your site because it makes everything faster. Your site should be fast before you consider what version of PHP you're on. Now, when you get into how do I handle more orders, the stack comes into play a bit more. Certain SQL servers or PHP versions will handle scale better. But the very first thing you need to do is make sure your site's fast. If it's not fast with one user on it, it's not going to be fast with 10, 100,000, 10,000 people on it. So I try and run my sites on terrible infrastructure just to see, okay, what's going to happen. If it runs great, then I'm a lot more confident that when it's on good infrastructure, then we're going to be even better.
So simple, like real simple. If I would think so. Speed. I mean, you got to make sure you're on a good host. If
Right.
you're paying like $9 a month for your hosting, you're getting what you're paying for, and you're going to be in trouble. I mean, make sure that you don't have plugins and theme code that is slowing down your site, and you can do something as simple as testing the speed on Pingdom, and maybe deactivating some of the plugins or changing to a default theme and seeing if that makes a big difference if you have some major load time problems. Now, if I were to go to Pingdom and just load up my site, what's like a decent what's a decent load time, and what's where I should be worried?
So according to Google and conversion metrics, you really want your site loading in less than 2 seconds, less than 1, preferably. But the faster it loads, the better your conversion will be. Generally, if a site's loading within a second or two, you're probably going to be okay. I've not seen sites that are loading in that time fail as often. Now, if your site's loading even at 3, 4, 5 seconds, you're starting to see more issues. Generally, most of that load time is being spent in the database, and that's where the issues come from. Because just like in the post meta table example, if you have a lot of people visiting your site and not even checking out, and you queue up those queries, your site will go down. So the first thing I do with any site is honestly install Query Monitor. It's a free plugin on WordPress.org. And I just browse around the site and look, okay, what's slow? The Query Monitor will actually turn red and orange and different colors in your admin bar of your site when you're logged in as an admin to tell you what it's doing or what it's seeing. And just browse around the site, find anything it tracks as a slow query, figure out why it's slow and fix it. If it's coming from a plugin, then just decide, okay, this plugin, is it making me money? Is this plugin directly responsible for increasing my conversions or increasing the size of carts? Or what is this plugin doing to add value to my store? Not, is this a cool feature that my customers like, but is this actually helping me make money? And if it's not making money and you're already having a slow site, you should probably remove it. And sometimes figuring out how a plugin helps you make money is sort of hard. A social login plugin, for example, if configured properly, can help you make more money because it's easier for people to sign up. But if it's just set up with every single social network possible and they get to checkout and now they have 50 social icons in front of them, it might actually be hurting you and making money. So that's a whole different conversation. But Query Monitor is a simple way that any store owner, large or small, can, without any money whatsoever, start figuring out what's making my site slow. Once you're past that, generally New Relic is a good next step. Application monitoring services like New Relic, if you don't want to use New Relic specifically, just anything that tracks the live site. The reason I believe that's important is when you have traffic on the live site, it's going to perform a little differently than you browsing around. So things like checkouts or the My Account page that are slow for some users in some edge cases, it will capture those requests, log it, and it'll tell you this was slow. And for ColorPop, a large part of my job was just making sure the site stayed online, making sure the site was fast, stayed online. And to do that, I spent a lot of time in New Relic looking at every single thing that was running slow and figuring out how to fix that. And it was just fix one thing, figure out what's next, and fix that and move on.
Wow. Now, if you're not a developer and you don't have the money in your budget to pay for New Relic because it's kind of expensive, and you're not going to be digging into the code. I mean, what we're talking about here is that there's a bunch of code running in your site, and if you don't want to dig into it, the best thing you can do is remove it. So you can just deactivate any plugins that are not completely necessary. You can remove, get a better theme maybe if that's causing a problem. You can move to a better host, a managed WordPress host that has lots of caching and things set up for, the WooCommerce environment. Those are just simple steps you can take. What Patrick's talking about is, if you have a budget and you want a team to help you out, a team like Mindsize can do great things for your store and make sure that you are not losing money when you have a spike in orders. So if we're talking about, if we move on from like the basic WooCommerce shop owner, and we're talking about somebody who's like really doing a lot of scale, what is it that they can do? We were talking about the post meta table, how WooCommerce stores data in the post meta table, and it's really slow, especially at scale. There are weird things that can happen when you start to get to crazy numbers. Like we were talking about how somebody, they had a coupon and the coupon was used over and over and over, and eventually somebody used the coupon one too many times and just broke everything. And it was just because, just so much data was being stored in this one coupon. So I know that there's a plugin that you guys have worked on that moves stuff from the post meta table into custom tables. Is that correct? And is that something
Yes.
that people should look into if they're, doing really high scale?
Definitely.
Tell us more about that.
So we worked with Liquid Web over the past few months. Liquid Web's coming out with a managed WooCommerce hosting offering. It's everything I've seen about it is, I don't really want to say game changing, but in that area, it's a different idea of how to run WooCommerce from a managed host. If you think of a normal managed WordPress host, it's traditionally throw up some servers, put caching in front of it, and go on your way. It works great at scale because WordPress, you're just looking at blog posts. But WooCommerce has changed that because you can't cache inserting data in the database. It's flipped everything upside down, and it just doesn't work the way it used to. So part of what Liquid Web wants to do is make WooCommerce run better at scale, and not just on their infrastructure, but a lot of this stuff they're doing is being open sourced. For example, the order tables plugin we built with them. So what this does is it will take all of your order data, the core order data anyways, like the billing address, shipping address, the totals, and put that into a separate table. So for now, it still links to a post so that it's backwards compatible. You can still use meta for certain things. But if you take the 50 post metas you were inserting before, that number is down to 5 now. And that's not, I talked to a couple people at WooCommerce or WooConf, and I'd say it's 15% the original order volume. And at first they think, okay, it's 15% better. That's good. But it's 15% of the original order volume. And for a load test, I can't remember the number of orders we did it for. We went from 11,500 inserts in that period for creating that many orders and down to 2,500, which if you think of the just scale of that decrease alone, stores large and small will benefit from this by running their stores on less hardware while also being faster at the same time. And the goal is to have this as a feature plugin in the future where you can install it on any WooCommerce store and just have this functionality without anything breaking. That's what WooCommerce 3 largely was built to support by adding the CRUD systems in the data stores. But eventually, we hope for it to be in WooCommerce Core. And if that's in 4.0, that's going to be awesome. I hope it's 4.0. No one can tell the future. But this is coming to all store owners one way or the other in the future. It's just a matter of time. And if anyone wants to get involved in that or start testing it early, they're more than welcome to. The plugin is openly on GitHub. The easiest way to find it is probably just Googling Liquid Web's managed WooCommerce blog post where they announced their private beta that they're opening up. And it's linked to right in that blog post. Otherwise, you can look at Liquid Web's GitHub and find it there for now.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited for that. I think it's really going to help WooCommerce scale in the future, just kind of out of the box, so people don't have to worry about this stuff quite as much, which is going to be great.
Yeah, it'll speed up the dashboards. It'll make reporting work. Most of the sites I work on, I can't even use WooCommerce Core reporting because the reports have to run against that same post meta table, which is not built for reporting. So you're going to have faster reports that work more. The MyAdmin or the WordPress admin for managing orders will be faster. The My Account page will be faster because it can query customer orders better. When we made a similar change on another large site, we went from having the My Account page show up constantly in our slow traces in New Relic to never. Even under scale, 5, 10, 15,000 people on the site, the My Account page never showed up as a slow issue because we were querying against a custom table for orders.
Interesting. Yeah. So we've got Black Friday, Cyber Monday coming up soon, and many store owners may be seeing a spike in traffic. What is like a couple real simple things that they can do to, number one, test their site to see if they're going to have a problem? And number two, just like maybe one simple step they can take to remedy that?
The simplest first step is just browse your own site. Log in as a normal user and see what's slow. If something's slow now, it's going to be slower later. Query Monitor is a great first step towards that too. These are the simple things you could do without getting into too much code and having to get into technical details like load tests. A load test would be ideal. If you don't know when your site's going to break, then you don't know how to plan for it. So if your site can be load tested up to 5,000 people on it, and with a good load test that is structured well with what people are actually going to be doing, you can be watching your Google Analytics during Black Friday and know, okay, I'm at 4,000 people, I've got some room, and then eventually maybe you'll hit 5,000 and you'll then start getting a bit worried. But the simplest thing is test and figure out where your limits are.
What load testing tool do you think is the easiest to use?
I would likely go with Load Impact, just because it's simple to set up. When you're using Load Impact, I think I mentioned before, you can get a Chrome extension that you just record what you're doing on your site. So you don't have to know how to write the code of a load test. You just have to know how to click record and browse around your site. That'll all be captured. It'll generate the load test for you. Once you get into actually creating orders, it gets a little bit trickier because you have to deal with credit card gateways and how to handle nonces within WordPress and making sure the checkout doesn't fail because of security issues. But just browsing around the site, even if you know how many people can browse around, is a lot more than you knew before if you weren't doing load tests. Right. And it's reach out to your web hosts. If you're with a managed WordPress host or even a generic WordPress host, and you tell them, I'm expecting a lot of traffic for Black Friday. And then after you get past the sales pitch of, okay, here's the bigger servers that you can use to support your site, they might be able to help you run these load tests as well. It's in your host's best interest for you to succeed, because if you fail on Black Friday, the first person you're going to blame is your host. And if your host gets blamed, you're likely going to move away, and they lost that revenue now. And you're probably going to go somewhere else that next year you'll fail for the same reasons on Black Friday because a server doesn't solve everything. But just talk to your host. If you have no one else to talk to, they can at least point you in the right direction or help you out.
Yep. Awesome. Well, Patrick, I think we had some awesome stuff in this interview. Hopefully it's helpful to store owners out there. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you think we should have mentioned?
We already talked about it, but I'll reiterate it again. Test your site. Just figure out what's wrong with your site. Figure out what's slow on your site. Anything that's not making you money, turn it off. Figure out a plan for if your site dies, what are you going to do? If it's down, you can't rely on calling your hosting support when everyone else is calling them that their site's down. So if you have a developer you can reach out to, if you know I can turn this plugin off and get more capacity. There were more than one case where we turned off the My Account page. We just created a simple redirect from My Account to another page because we knew that the My Account page would cause issues at scale. So when we hit a certain number of users on the site, we turned off the My Account page, and then we got about 10,000 users worth of capacity back. Just know what's wrong with your site. If there is anything wrong with it, know where your limits are and plan for what you will do up to them and how you will get past them. And You're running out of time too. You've got about a month left, and other sites has started planning 11 months ago.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, thanks so much, Patrick. Patrick is, they specialize in e-commerce over at Mindsize. And if you have needs that you want to help scale WooCommerce or, just scale your site in general, definitely get in touch with them. Patrick, where can everybody find you?
So I'm on Twitter a lot, at PM Garman, Garman, not like the GPS. And I'm in Slack a lot too. So if you're in the WooCommerce Slack, which hopefully you are if you're using WooCommerce, I'm in there. It's the same name, PM Garman. There's weekly dev chats, or every 2 weeks, I believe there's dev chats in a core channel there. And if you're running a WooCommerce site, it might be good to get involved there as well.
Cool. And they can also find your agency at mindsize.me. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Awesome. Well, hey, Patrick, thanks so much for your time here.
Yeah, no problem.
See you later.